my parents are my audience. We are doing ineffective listening by me. So there are 6 different types of ineffective listening. The first is pseudo-listening, and then monopolizing, selective listening, defensive listening, ambushing, and literal listening. So for pseudo-listening, people appear to be listening, but they actually are not. They usually do this whenever they're bored, but they feel like it's important that they listen. For example, like a meeting, you would do that. Or superficial social interaction. So if you like see somebody at the grocery store, you'll just exchange pleasantries and have no idea what they said. And then also work conversations tend to be, let's do this. So monopolizing is hogging the stage by continually focusing the communication on ourselves instead of the person who is talking. And that came right out of the textbook. And there's a couple of ways that you can do this. So conversational rerouting. A person shifts the conversation to be about themselves. So an example would be if somebody's having a problem and they're telling you about it. So if they have like a roommate issue and they're like, oh, my roommate did this too, and then you expand on your roommate issues and never really make it back to the original person's issue, then you rerouted the conversation. And then interrupting, a person will butt in and change the topic, and then they also question or challenge the person speaking in order to disrupt or take over. So some examples of this, somebody could say like, how could you think that? Which is kind of like a condescending way of interrupting them. Or offering premature advice to establish command of the situation, or to put down the other person in that conversation, is another way of monopolizing via interrupting. Our next one is selective listening. So with selective listening, the listener is only hearing parts or using parts of what the person has said. They only pick out the parts that they want to hear most of the time. So if you are listening and you hear a group talking and you like notice that your friend's name was said, then you perk up and listen to that for a little bit. But whenever they go on to something else, you may not notice what they're talking about anymore. And then also another form is stopping listening whenever you're bored or you don't agree with the speaker. So this happens a lot like in class because you get bored listening to your lecturer, and they will use things like this will be on the test to perk you up and get you to listen again. And then also this can happen if you're having a conversation with someone and they go off on politics you don't agree with or any other kind of controversial topic. Most of the time you just kind of stop listening to them, which is selective listening, which also could tie back into the pseudo listening that we talked about in the beginning. And then defensive listening. This involves perceiving a personal attack, criticism, hostile undertone in communication when none is intended. Also source that one from the book. So you assume that the person doesn't like you or respect you even if that wasn't stated, and you're assuming that what the person is saying is negative even if it's not, and that their motive is against you, basically. And then this can happen sometimes if you're like personally insecure or you judge yourself too harshly. So in like a work situation, if you're assigned certain tasks, you may think, oh, well, they did this because like they didn't like me, or they don't think I'm good at my job, or something of that nature. Ambushing is listening to details in order to use what you hear against the person that is speaking to you. So this is basically taking monopolizing and putting it in an extreme setting. So good examples of this are presidential debates. They really just nitpick everything they say and then rethrow it at them. And then this can also happen in a job competition where there's two people interviewing for the same job and then stating why they're better for the job than the other person instead of really like taking in and listening to why they think that they're better. So when people are ambushing, they display no openness, make no effort to understand the other's meaning, take no interest in recognizing value in what another person is saying, and they don't want a genuine dialogue. That also came from the textbook. So then the final one is literal listening. This listening is only listening to the content without taking the relational meaning of what's being said. So you listen, literal listening neglects others' feelings and our relationship with them. So you basically, if somebody says, yeah, okay, yeah, we can go do that, if you only hear those words and not the fact that they kind of were indifferent in their tone and shrugged, you would think that they're on board. But if you listen to their tone and notice they're shrugging, they probably don't want to do it. But a literal listener doesn't take that into account. This is often found with autistic people, but other people do this as well. Like whenever I say it's fine, it's never fine. But anyways, so in conclusion, we all listen ineffectively at some point in one or more of these ways, but it's our responsibility to recognize when we do this and to do our best to listen effectively whenever we possibly can. And even if we need to backtrack and say, oh, I wasn't actually listening, can you repeat yourself? Or did you mean this by what you said? To make sure that you're interpreting correctly and actually hearing what you're saying and what's being said to you. Thank you. That's my works cited.